Hey everybody, ronarray here, and most of us don't really like clicking too many buttons during the harder fights. GGG added a few ways for us to avoid that in 3.25. So in this video I wanted to share a cool technique that you can use to automate first of your two cursors without using any such stuff as rings or second skill with hextouch. It is simple, effective, and very useful, especially since you can automate two cursors at the same time while keeping both at maximum level and maximum quality. Please keep in mind that the trick works only with melee skills, so it will not work for mages. Let's go. So, explaining how the technique works. You will need to use auto exertion to pretty much automate your work rise, so it will still reserve your mana, around 11% in my case, which is not a lot for automated cursors and charges. And you will need to link auto exertion together with Battle Mage Cry. You don't need to level up Battle Mage Cry or to get quality for it, because we don't need to use it too often since it's still consuming mana, and we need to save that mana. Auto exertion link with a Battle Mage Cry will pretty much lead Battle Mage Cry to reuse the skills that link to it. Every time that Battle Mage Cry is used, around every 7 seconds, your next 5 melee attacks will be exerted, and exerted attacks will trigger a supported spell with their first melee hit. I have it linked with Vulnerability, which is a spell, and it will be able to just recast the curse. Vulnerability duration is 11 seconds, and duration of cooldown at Battle Mage Cry is 7 seconds. It pretty much leads to guaranteed vulnerability, always up on enemies. Since you can use 4 links with it, you can literally link the second curse too. So for example, if you have second curse on the ring or on the amulet, you can pretty much link punishment here or any other curse that you like, or some kind of mark for example. And it will work just perfectly. So another prominent question is, do we have a cast time? Because usually work rise requires at least like 0.3 seconds to cast. But when we are using auto exertion, there is no cast time for our work rise. So don't worry, your character will not be stopped and the cry is just going to be used automatically somewhere in the background. You're just going to receive the bonus. You also will be unable to see exertion number. However, keep in mind that you're still going to pay mana for the whole process, so be careful with that and make sure that you have enough mana. So as you can see, I do not cast vulnerability manually and have it completely automated by Battle Mage Cry. And uptime on most of the enemies who survive more than 3 or 4 seconds is very high, and it's like 100%, because duration of the curse is 11 seconds and you will have 7 seconds of cooldown for Battle Mage Cry. It also provides a pretty decent uptime on boss, as you can see as well, because I'm still hitting it and my attacks are still exerted. We can buff 2 cursors that way, and it's definitely going to increase DPS significantly. So try to use that technique if you have a proper Annoyed on the amulet. However, there's also an option to automate other skills to get various benefits. Let's talk about it too. So first and the most obvious option to pretty much automate is Cold Snap. Cold Snap can provide a decent amount of frenzy charges. As you can see, I just received 3 pretty consistently. And while you're clearing the maps, you will be able to have frenzy charges at all times. It reminds of Blood Rage, but compared to Blood Rage, you're not losing health, and it could be easier in some cases. So if you have an open slot, Cold Snap could be a very good option, because uptime for charges is very good, and you're constantly going to have them. Another cool option is pretty much Purifying Flame. Purifying Flame is going to provide you Consecrated Ground, as you can see I have one here, and going to help you a lot with regenerating your life, since you will constantly stay on Consecrated Ground. So that's an option that can help you to pretty much feel very good, especially at bosses, if you want to regenerate a little more health. Another cool option is pretty much Void Sphere. If you're going to cast a Void Sphere, it's going to move enemies in, and it's first going to move them, so if you're playing like a bleed build, since enemies are moving, it will pretty much deal more damage to them, especially if you're not using Aggravated technique. However, it's still a pretty nice skill to just group the enemies, and it definitely helps with that as well. I'm using just first level of the Void Sphere here, so don't worry about it. At higher levels, it's going to work a little better. But as you can see, it's casted pretty consistently. Another great option is Frostbomb. Frostbomb is going to pretty much get rid of regeneration to your enemies. Right now in the game, there's a lot of enemies that can regenerate pretty fast, and if you consider it like really annoying, you can try to use the Frostbomb here, the Frostbomb, to pretty much get rid of their regeneration. So, sometimes I'm using it because it can help in some particular encounters, such as overbuffed expedition if there was a life regeneration. And the last option is pretty much Way of Conviction. As you can see, the skill using Way of Conviction just fine, and it can apply elemental exposure. If you're playing elemental melee build, for example, with cool elemental skills, you can automate your exposures that way if you don't have different options. So one of the best options for second curse, especially for melee builds, is pretty much Punishment. Because Punishment can provide you with a significant bonus damage, and it can also debilitate enemies, which is going to raise your survivability, which is pretty important for melee builds. I think that for elemental builds, you will be able to use different elemental cursors such as Elemental Weakness together with Frostbite, for example. But for most of the melee builds and physical builds, I think Punishment is one of the best options. You can also try to use a mark such as Assassin Mark or Poacher's Mark, but I don't really think that marks are that great if you're not playing full crit build. And for bleed builds, Punishment is probably the only option, because we don't really need any other bonuses. However, even if you can utilize crit, I still think that early in the league, it's very cool to try and use Punishment, because it can both provide about 60% of more damage to enemies that has lower than 50% health, and it will pretty much lead to 30% of DPS increase overall. It can also give a debilitate, as I already mentioned, and I think it's worth it, because it will provide a lot of quality of life together with damage. So try to use Punishment at least once if you have a second curse slot, and I'm sure you will not be disappointed. We also have a pretty cool option. If you're using two-handed weapon, for example like two-handed axe or two-handed sword, you can try to automate 3 cures at the same time. For example, Punishment, Vulnerability, and Assassin Mark, especially if you're using crits. You can even go further, and I think even 4 cures are possible, but I'm not sure if any build can properly benefit from it. However, you can still automate one of the skills that I already mentioned, and 3 cures together, so it will lead you to a 6 link and then I think it's going to be a pretty alright technique, because you're going to receive a lot of different bonuses from that. And adding Punishment together with any mark and vulnerability, I think it's going to work so good for physical builds. So try to experiment with it, and I'm sure you will be able to get the best option that will work with your own build. So the last question, is a technique worth 10% of mana regeneration, even like 11 in some cases? I honestly think that yes, because it will provide a lot of quality of life. Automated cures will feel just awesome, and you will be able to get some cool stuff like charges or even second cures on top. So I'm going to use it on almost all my melee builds from now on, because I think the technique is like really cool and should provide a lot of quality of life. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.